I inherited my grandfather's cabin, but the town thinks I was the reason he passed. I was halfway through debugging a client's nightmare of a website when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, I usually did, but something about the area code made my chest tighten. "Oswald Heller?" a calm, gravelly voice asked. "Yes. Who's this?" "This is Walter Myers. I'm an attorney representing your grandfather's estate. I'm sorry to inform you that he passed away 3 days ago." I froze, not from grief, not yet. Just that strange hollow moment when you realize the world has shifted, but your body hasn't caught up. "My grandfather? Edgar Heller?" "Yes, I believe you were his only living relative. He named you the sole beneficiary in his will." I sank into my desk chair. The keyboard pressed uncomfortably into my wrist, but I didn't move. I haven't spoken to him in years," I muttered, mostly to myself. There was a pause, like the attorney was debating how much to say. "He requested that you return to Pine Hollow to handle the estate in person. There's a property involved, a cabin in the woods. He left everything to you." I hadn't been back to Pine Hollow in over a decade. Not since I left at 19 with a duffel bag, a scholarship, and a heart full of resentment. My mother was spiraling into addiction back then, and Grandpa Edgar had tried to raise me as best he could. But we'd fought. Over her, over everything. After the call ended, I just sat there in silence, watching the Chicago skyline blur through my apartment window. Rain slid down the glass like tears too proud to fall. The next morning, I packed a small bag and hit the road. Pine Hollow hadn't changed, not in the good nostalgic way, more like a forgotten postcard left in the sun. The same faded gas station near the town's edge. The same rusting "Welcome to Pine Hollow," where pines whisper and people listen sign. I almost laughed at the irony. It was raining again when I arrived at Myers and Colton Law. The office smelled like old paper and lemon-scented furniture polish. Walter Myers looked like a man who came with the building, gray suit, wire-framed glasses, voice like an obituary. He handed me a thick manila envelope. "Your grandfather left clear instructions. The cabin is yours, along with its contents and remaining funds in his account. There's a key and a map. No mortgage, no debts. Just the cabin." He didn't say it like it was a gift, more like a burden. "What about the cause of death?" I asked. "Officially, heart failure. But he was found late. A neighbor called it in after not seeing him for days." My stomach churned. Edgar had been strong, stern even, when I knew him. Not the type to fade quietly. As I turned to leave, Myers added, "You might hear some talk in town. Rumors. People found it strange how sudden it was." "What are they saying?" I asked, pausing with my hand on the doorknob. He adjusted his glasses. "That you hadn't visited in years. That he left everything to you. That you showed up right after he died. Let me guess. They think I killed him." He didn't smile. "Small towns don't forget, Oswald. And they rarely forgive." I walked out into the rain, the weight of a past I'd tried to bury now sitting heavy in the trunk of my car. I had no idea what I'd find in that cabin, but something told me this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about secrets, ones someone didn't want me to find. The church was small, the kind with creaky pews, stained glass windows that didn't match, and a smell of old hymnals and wet wool. Rain pattered against the roof like a ticking clock, slow and persistent. I stood near the back. Not because I was late, but because I wasn't sure I belonged there. People turned when I walked in. Heads tilted, whispers stirred. I caught the tail end of one. "Did you hear he came back just in time to claim the will?" Another voice, low and sharp. "Haven't seen him in years. Now suddenly he cares." I kept my eyes forward. The coffin sat at the front, closed, dark wood gleaming in the low light. No flowers, no family photos. Just the stark reality of a man who lived alone and died alone. The priest said the usual words about peace and rest, but I could barely focus. My mind kept returning to the letter, the key, the tension in Myers' voice. And the way the town looked at me, like I was something foul dragged in with the rain. After the service, people filed out slowly, murmuring condolences they didn't mean. I stayed back until the church emptied, then walked out into the drizzle. That's when I saw him, Sheriff Marlowe, tall, broad, stiff in his tan uniform. He stood near the front steps with arms crossed, watching me like I was a stray dog sniffing around his porch. "You're Edgar's grandson," he said, voice gravelly but sharp. "Oswald, I offered. He nodded once. You planning to stay long? Just enough to settle things. Funny timing. Haven't seen you in over a decade. Then the old man keels over and here you are. There it was. Not subtle. Not warm. Are you implying something, Sheriff? He held my gaze. I'm just saying, Pine Hollow's the kind of place that remembers. People talk. Let them, I said, and walked away. I ended up in Betty's diner. Same neon sign, same greasy air, same cracked vinyl booths. Betty herself was behind the counter, older but still recognizably the girl who once passed me notes in biology class. She looked up as I entered, blinked, and forced a polite smile. Well, look who crawled out of the city. Hey, Betty. She poured coffee without asking. Didn't expect to see you back, especially not for this. Yeah, me neither. She hesitated, then leaned in. Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but people around here, they think it's weird. How he died? Wasn't it a heart attack? That's what the coroner said, but no one saw him for days. Body wasn't found until the neighbor's dog started barking like mad. Said the house smelled off. I rubbed my temples. Jesus. Betty lowered her voice. And then you show up, just in time for the will. You know how that looks. I nodded. I do. She softened a little. I don't think you do anything, Oz, but others, well, small towns love their gossip. As I left the diner, I passed by Mayor Kelton. All polished shoes, slick hair, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Mr. Heller, he said, shaking my hand a little too hard. Sorry for your loss. Edgar was a character. Thank you. I hope you'll consider staying. The town could use a fresh face. I knew a veiled threat when I heard one, or maybe a warning. Either way, the message was clear. Watch yourself. As I stepped into the rain again, I felt it. That awful crawling sensation on the back of my neck. Like someone, somewhere, was already rewriting the story of how Edgar Heller died. And I was the villain in their version. The road to the cabin wasn't really a road, more like a path that nature had half swallowed. My car complained the entire way, tires crunching over gravel and roots, branches slapping at the windows. The GPS gave up 5 miles ago. By the time I pulled up to the clearing, the sun had dipped low enough to paint the pines in eerie gold. Mist clung to the ground like it was afraid to rise, and the trees loomed tall and still like silent watchers. The cabin stood in the center, squat, weathered, and somehow expectant. It looked like it had grown out of the forest rather than been built. The porch sagged slightly. One shutter hung at an angle, and ivy crept up the stone foundation like a slow invasion. I stood there for a moment, key in hand, heart heavier than it should have been. The door groaned as I pushed it open. Inside, time had paused, and not in a comforting, nostalgic way. Dust coated everything, the leather armchair by the fireplace, the books stacked beside it, the lamp that leaned like it hadn't stood straight in years. A sour, musty smell hung in the air, sharp and earthy. I dropped my duffel bag at the door and stepped further in, each floorboard groaning beneath my weight. On the walls were old black and white photos of my grandfather, mostly younger, standing next to men in uniforms, men in suits, and one with a boy I barely recognized as myself. The kitchen was small, cluttered, but functional. The fridge was unplugged, and a single plate sat in the drying rack, coated in dust like everything else. Then I saw it, a large oak cabinet against a back wall, its doors locked with a padlock that looked newer than anything else in the house. That struck me as odd. The rest of the place was frozen in the past, but this lock was recent, modern. Someone had wanted to keep whatever was inside. I gave it a light tug. No give. Behind the kitchen, a short hallway led to the bedroom and what looked like a door to the basement. This one was even more curious. Reinforced metal, painted to match the paneling but unmistakably industrial. It had no visible knob, just a slot that looked like it needed a keycard or code. Definitely not a standard cabin feature. The bedroom was modest. A neatly made bed, must have been made days or weeks before he died, a small dresser, and a nightstand with a wind-up clock ticking softly. It was the only sound, other than my own breathing. I opened a window to let the stale air out and watched the fog creeping in between the trees like it had business here. I should have felt some kind of peace, some nostalgic comfort, but instead, I felt watched. As night fell, the temperature dropped fast. I built a fire in the old stone hearth. Thankfully, Grandpa had left a box of dry logs and matches in the corner. The flames flickered shadows across the walls, turning coat racks into figures, knots in wood into watching eyes. I ate a granola bar, drank from a bottled water, and stretched out on the old couch. Sleep came slowly and badly. Sometime past midnight, I heard it. Crunch, a footstep. Outside. I sat up, the blanket sliding off. The fire had died down to glowing embers, painting the cabin in weak red light. I held my breath, straining to listen. Another crunch, closer. I crept to the window and gently pushed the curtain aside, but there was nothing. Just the fog, thicker now, moving like breath across the clearing. No animals, no people. I waited a full minute, 2. Silence. I closed the curtain, double-checked the front door, and added another log to the fire. But I didn't sleep after that. Not really, because if someone had been out there, they hadn't knocked, they hadn't spoken, they just stood there, watching. I didn't sleep much that night. Between the cold draft from the window, the unfamiliar creaks of the cabin, and the footsteps, or whatever they were, outside, I spent most of the hours until dawn staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was nothing. The next morning, a knock came just after breakfast. I opened the door to find Sheriff Marlowe standing on the porch, one hand resting on his belt like he was posing for a photo, the other clutching a steaming cup of coffee from Betty's. "Morning," he said, not smiling. I stepped aside. "You want to come in?" He didn't answer, just crossed the threshold like he owned the place. He looked around slowly, taking in the room like he was trying to memorize the layout. His eyes landed on the fireplace, the empty mug on the table, the photos on the wall. "Looks just like I remember it," he muttered. Though I was never invited past the porch, I didn't offer him a seat. "Something I can help you with?" He turned to face me, just tying up a few loose ends. You know how it is when someone dies unexpectedly. Questions get asked. I folded my arms. "Like what? Like when was the last time you spoke to your grandfather?" 3 years ago. A short phone call. We weren't close near the end." He nodded slowly. "Yet he left everything to you. Here we go." "I didn't ask for it," I said. We hadn't spoken much, but apparently he still saw me as family. "Uh-huh." Marlowe sipped his coffee, still watching me. "And your mother? She passed 6 years ago. Any other relatives? So you're the only one." I stared at him. "Is that a problem?" He let the silence stretch, then took a small notepad from his coat pocket. "Where were you the day he died?" "I was in Chicago. I can give you a list of clients I spoke to that week, time-stamped emails, whatever you need." "No need, not yet." He flipped the notepad closed. "You came back pretty fast." He had a lawyer. The will was read. I did what anyone would do. Some folks in town think it's a little too fast. Like you were expecting the call. I hadn't been here in over 10 years. Why would I plan anything? He shrugged. "Sometimes people get desperate. You work online, right? Freelance?" "Yeah." "Freelance can be unpredictable. Ever have money trouble? Are you implying I killed my grandfather for a forest cabin and a few $1,000s in an old account?" His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't take the bait. "Just trying to get a full picture." I stepped closer. "Well, Sheriff, if you want a full picture, maybe ask why he locked his basement door like it guarded a bank vault. Or why people think they saw someone on my porch last night." That stopped him. "You saw someone?" "I heard someone. They didn't knock. They just stood there." He scratched his jaw. "Could have been a hunter. Or a deer." I didn't respond. We both knew deer didn't walk like that. He turned toward the door. "Well, if you remember anything else, you know where to find me." "Yeah. In the diner with the rest of the town, gossiping." He paused at the door, glanced back at me. "Just remember, Oswald, people around here like things quiet. You dig too deep into the past, sometimes it digs back." And with that, he left, boots crunching on the gravel like punctuation marks. For a long moment, I just stood there, watching the fog swirl at the edge of the trees. I wasn't sure if the sheriff thought I was guilty, but I was starting to think he knew more than he was letting on. It started with a squeak. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just pacing, restless from the sheriff's visit, from the fog of suspicion settling over this town like a second weather system. I'd barely slept, and the silence in the cabin was starting to feel like a pressure in my chest. The floorboard near the bed creaked when I stepped on it, more than the others. not just a casual groan of old wood. This one dipped slightly under my weight, like it was hiding something. I stepped back and pressed my foot again. Same sound, same subtle give. I knelt down, ran my fingers along the seam. The plank was loose, not nailed, just carefully fitted in place. Heart thudding, I pried it up. There, in the shallow compartment beneath, was a small cloth-wrapped bundle, dust-covered but dry. I lifted it out gently, like it might explode, and unwrapped it. A thick envelope, yellowed at the edges. On the front, in my grandfather's bold, blocky handwriting, "For Oswald, only if I'm gone." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. My fingers were cold, but my palms were sweating. Inside was a single handwritten letter and something wrapped in wax paper, a small brass key. Not for a door, for something else. A symbol was engraved into the bow of the key, a stylized letter N, encircled like a crest. The letter read, "Oswald, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and not by choice. There are things in this cabin, and in this town, that go deeper than you know. You'll be tempted to think I was crazy. Maybe that's safer. But if you found this, then something is already moving. You must not trust anyone, not the sheriff, not the mayor, maybe not even the lawyer. This house remembers. I built it that way. Find the hidden room. It's not just a room. Use the key. The symbol will guide you. Edgar." I read the letter twice, then a third time. My throat was dry. My brain felt like it was trying to reboot. I looked at the key again. N, hidden room. Don't trust anyone. My first instinct was disbelief. It had to be some kind of paranoid rambling. But that metal door in the basement, it wasn't something a retiree installs for fun. The cabinet with the modern lock, the shadows moving outside, the cold stare of the sheriff. Something wasn't right. I sat back on the bed, letter in hand, key in my pocket. That phrase stuck in my head. This house remembers. A fragment of memory surfaced. Me at 10 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, Grandpa pouring me orange juice. I'd asked why he never had friends over, why he never went to church like the other old men. He'd smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. "This cabin's smarter than people think," he'd said. "Built it with my own hands. She keeps secrets better than most folks ever could." At the time, I thought he was just being weird. Now, I wasn't so sure. I went back to the floorboard, checked the compartment again. Nothing else. The envelope had been alone. No maps, no diagrams, just trust in my ability to follow a trail he clearly didn't want anyone else to find. I slid the plank back into place, packed the letter into my duffel bag, and turned toward the door to the basement. Still locked, still cold and quiet. But the key in my pocket suddenly felt heavier. That night, I didn't sleep much. Again. I left the light on. I wedged a chair under the doorknob. I kept the brass key within reach. Because if Grandpa was right, then someone out there knew I was here. And if he was wrong, then I was already losing my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about the letter. All day, I circled the cabin like a trapped animal, checking locks, pulling curtains shut, walking from room to room trying to see the place through my grandfather's eyes. He'd built this house with secrets in mind. That much was clear. It was late afternoon when I found the journal. It was tucked behind a row of old paperbacks in a glass-fronted cabinet in the living room. The glass was foggy with age, and the books inside smelled like wood smoke and mildew. Most were spy thrillers and war memoirs. But one book stood out, thicker, bound in worn black leather, no title on the spine. I pulled it free. It wasn't a book at all. It was a journal, and it was his. The first page had his name in neat block letters, Edgar Heller, and the year, 1986. The entries began short and mundane, notes about garden repairs, supply lists, mentions of Oz visiting this weekend that made my chest ache a little. But the further I read, the darker it got. September 3rd, 1991. Kelton's people are back at it. Another development deal under the table. He thinks no one's watching. But I have eyes. Witness says they're moving something, equipment, into the old mining tunnels. If true, that's federal land. April 12, 1994. Letter from Harlan went missing. Told him not to mail anything. I think they're monitoring outgoing now. August 8, 1998. Spoke with the witness again. He says they're building something under the old mill. Claims he heard voices, like chanting. Could be crazy. But he was scared. Said roomman isn't just storage. He disappeared 3 days later. That entry had a photo paperclipped to it, black and white, grainy. A man in a flannel jacket standing near a truck with a Pine Hollow logo on the side. Scribbled under the photo, witness, missing since Oct. 1998. I stared at the image for a long time. His face was partly turned, but the tension in his posture was clear, like he already knew something was coming for him. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. The ink grew shakier over the years, but the entries kept coming, like he couldn't stop digging, or couldn't stop watching his back. March 17, 2002. Found the listening device. They're inside the cabin now. I've started writing in code. July 4, 2010. The sheriff came by again. Said he was checking on me. I saw the glint of the recording pin on his jacket. Subtle, not subtle enough. And then finally, the last entry near the back dated just a few weeks before his death. November 3rd, 26X. I was followed again. Same truck, same turnoff near the ridge. I think they know I've been recording. I've moved the backups. If they find this journal, it won't matter. But if Oz finds it, son, they'll come for you next. Trust only the cabin. Trust no one else. I closed the journal slowly, heart thudding in my ears. It wasn't just paranoia. This wasn't a man unraveling. These were organized, detailed, dated records, names, locations, movements, all pointing to something rotten beneath Pine Hollow's surface. Some hidden operation, decades deep, and all connected to this room, and whatever that was, it was enough to get people killed. And now I had the key. The sun was setting outside, turning the fog golden, but all I could feel was the cold pressing in. Not from the cabin, but from what I'd just read. I tucked the journal under my arm and walked to the basement door again. Still locked, still silent, but I swear I could feel something behind it, waiting. I woke to smoke. It wasn't the soft, drifting smell of a fireplace. It was sharp, acrid, and wrong. My throat burned, and my eyes snapped open to a hazy orange glow flickering against the cabin walls. I jumped to my feet, heart slamming in my chest. The front door, the bottom of it was burning. Flames licked upward, chewing through the wood like hungry mouths. The doormat was already curling black. Heat pulsed through the room. I ran for the kitchen, grabbed the old fire extinguisher from under the sink, yanked the pin, and sprayed it like my life depended on it. Because it did. The foam hissed as it coated the flames. Smoke swirled around me in thick, angry clouds. I coughed hard, tears running down my face from the sting. After what felt like an eternity, the fire gave up. I dropped the extinguisher and stumbled back, lungs heaving. The bottom half of the door was scorched and half-eaten. If I'd woken up just minutes later, I wouldn't be standing here. I ran for my duffel bag in the bedroom, tearing it open. The journal, still there. The letter from under the floorboard, untouched. I shoved them both under my arm and raced to the window. Someone was there, a figure in the trees, tall, wearing dark clothes. Standing dead still, watching me. We locked eyes even through the fog and smoke. My hand went instinctively for the curtain, but I paused. And in that second, the figure turned and ran. Fast, no hesitation, no panic, just calculated retreat. I stood there frozen. Not from fear, not exactly. It was something colder, more precise. Someone had set my front door on fire. Someone had wanted me out of the picture. And now they knew I had survived. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The operator picked up after one ring. Pine Hollow's emergency system was nothing if not prompt. Fire, I croaked. Someone set fire to my cabin. I need the sheriff, now. The woman on the other end asked for my name, the location. I gave it, voice still rough from smoke. She was calm, professional, too calm. We'll send someone out, she said. Send the fire department. No need, she replied. Looks like you already took care of it. I blinked. What? The sheriff will come by in the morning. Click. No follow-up questions. No are you safe. No dispatch code read aloud in the background. I lowered the phone and stared at it. That wasn't how emergency response was supposed to go. That wasn't how concern sounded. That was dismissal. Brush off, silence in place of help. They knew. Whoever they were, the ones Grandpa wrote about, the ones who watched, who recorded, who erased, they were still here, still working, and now they were escalating. I spent the rest of the night by the window with the journal in my lap and a fire poker in my hand, watching the tree line. The fog never lifted. The figure didn't return, but something had changed. I wasn't just the outsider anymore. I was a threat, and someone had decided it was time to put me out before I got too close to whatever my grandfather had died trying to protect. By morning, I'd made a decision. If they were willing to burn the place down to keep me out, then I had to know what was behind that basement door. The brass key with the engraved N had been burning a hole in my pocket for days. I had stared at the door every night, hearing echoes of Grandpa's voice from the letter. This house remembers. Use the key. The symbol will guide you. So I did. The door to the basement was exactly as I remembered, industrial, cold to the touch, out of place in a forest cabin. I inserted the key, half expecting it wouldn't work, or worse, that it would set off some kind of alarm. But with a soft click, the lock turned. I pulled the heavy door open and descended the narrow wooden staircase. The air grew cooler, denser. Dust tickled my throat. A faint metallic smell hung in the air. Not blood exactly, but old machinery, rust, and something preserved. At the bottom was another door, steel, windowless, sealed with a thick rotary latch. On the wall beside it was a keypad and a faded sticker that read, "Authorized access only, N section." I froze. Room N. I pressed the key again into a slot beneath the pad. Another soft click. The latch released. I braced myself and pulled. The door opened into a windowless chamber, part bunker, part archive. The room was maybe 20 feet wide, lit by a single flickering overhead bulb. On the far wall were maps of the Pine Hollow area, marked with circles, red pins, and dates stretching back 30 years. The kind of thing you'd see in a conspiracy movie, except this was real. A table stood in the center, covered in papers, photographs, and a single old-school reel-to-reel tape recorder. It looked ancient, Cold War era, but the tape on it was fresh. A sticky note on top read, "Play me first." I sat down in the old chair and hesitated, hand hovering over the switch. Then I hit play. The machine whirred to life. After a moment of static, I heard his voice. "Grandpa's Oz. If you're hearing this, I'm gone." And it wasn't an accident. His voice was hoarse but steady, focused. "They told me your father died in a car crash. That's what they all said. But it wasn't the road that killed him. It was the truth." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Your dad found something in the town records, in the contracts. He said there was land being bought up quietly, under fake names, a private project, military maybe, corporate, maybe worse. He was going to report it. I told him to wait, to get proof. 2 weeks later, he was gone. The silence after that was crushing. Then he spoke again, softer. I knew they'd come for me eventually. I played dumb, hid everything I could. This room, this is all that's left of the real story. What I saw, what they did. I'm sorry I never told you. I wanted to protect you. But maybe that was the wrong choice. If you want to walk away, I won't blame you. But if you stay, don't stop. Don't trust them. Don't trust anyone." The tape clicked and whirred as it ended. I sat frozen, staring at the machine. My father hadn't died in an accident. And now my grandfather was dead too, likely murdered, just like him. I looked at the maps again, at the lines connecting names, symbols, dates. It wasn't paranoia. It was a network, a plan. And I was sitting in the middle of it. They'd killed to protect their secret. But now I had the truth. And I wasn't going to let it burn with the rest of this place. I spent the rest of the day in the hidden room trying to piece everything together. Map after map, file after file, dates, photos, coordinates, scribbled notes in my grandfather's sharp handwriting. It was like he'd been constructing a case for years, one scrap of truth at a time. But he hadn't just been collecting facts, he'd been documenting a disease, and its name was Pine Hollow. The maps revealed a pattern. Buildings erected and torn down in quiet corners of the forest. Mining tunnels reopened and resealed. Land deeds passed between shell companies. Witnesses interviewed, then crossed out. Some of the names I recognized, old neighbors, local hunters, even a former teacher, all listed as disappeared or discredited. It wasn't random, it was a system, a structure of control. And at the center were two familiar names, Kelton, Marlowe, the mayor and the sheriff. Every thread led back to them. Kelton's name appeared in dozens of notes, development deals, budget meetings, land transfers. There were memos about experimental funding and off-the-record projects. Grandpa had circled one meeting in red ink and written, "Not town approved." Who's funding this? And then there was Sheriff Marlowe, the man who had looked me in the eye and asked if I had money problems, who stood on my porch sipping coffee while people whispered I was a killer. He'd been listed in multiple entries, not as an enforcer, but as a cleaner. "Marlowe handles the exits," Grandpa wrote. "He makes people disappear the old-fashioned way, silence and fear." I flipped through more pages, stopping at a section marked Burn List. Photographs of buildings that had caught fire, suspicious blazes over the past 20 years. One of them looked a lot like my cabin. They'd done this before. The hidden room, this wasn't just a panic bunker, it was a vault of truth, and now it was mine. I sat at the table and stared at a photo of my dad. He was young, standing beside Grandpa, both of them in the woods, holding fishing poles and grinning. It looked ordinary, until you noticed the shadow in the background, a black SUV tucked between the trees. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, "Last trip before he died." I felt something shift in me then, a quiet click, like the last piece falling into place. This wasn't about inheritance. It never had been. Grandpa hadn't left me the cabin because he wanted me to have land or lumber or a place to retreat from the world. He'd left it because he knew the town would come for it, and for the evidence inside, the moment he was gone. He hadn't given me a home. He'd handed me a mission. I climbed back upstairs and stood in the main room, looking around. The photos on the walls, the cabinet with its modern lock, the scarred wooden floors. Every creak, every drawer, every panel in this cabin had been touched by him, protected, prepared. He'd turned this house into a weapon, or a shield, and now it was mine to use. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. The fog was rising again from the forest floor, curling like smoke through the trees. Somewhere out there, people still believed I'd come here just for a piece of property, that I was just some estranged grandson looking to cash in on a legacy. They didn't know. They didn't know I had the truth now, and the files, and the voice on the tape. They didn't know what was coming, but I did, because when a place rots from the inside, you don't run from it, you dig it out by the roots. The hardest part wasn't uploading the evidence. It was deciding that I wouldn't run. I spent 2 days scanning pages, digitizing old maps, recording voiceovers explaining what the hell people were looking at. I edited my grandfather's tape just enough to make it clear and powerful. His voice, steady and unshakable, saying the words I'd now memorized. "Your dad didn't die in an accident. He found something." And they silenced him for it. That became the title of the stream. I scheduled the broadcast for 8 p.m. Friday night, peak time, small town habits. I didn't promote it, didn't tag anyone, just uploaded it on my grandfather's old YouTube account, still active, and let it spread. And it did. Faster than I expected. I watched from the cabin as the viewer count climbed, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Local residents, true crime enthusiasts, journalists. I posted the link on every town message board I could find. They watched. They heard my grandfather's voice, crackling but strong. They saw his journal entries, scanned and annotated. They saw the photo of the missing witness from 1998. They heard the part where he said, "They'll come for my grandson next." And suddenly, it wasn't just my voice echoing in the dark. It was theirs. Comments exploded. Shares surged. People in Pine Hollow started asking questions out loud, not just in whispers. A retired teacher posted that she remembered the man in the photo. A nurse said she treated a burned hunter 15 years ago who disappeared the next day. And someone, I still don't know who, sent the whole stream to a local journalist. That's when things really broke open. By Saturday morning, it was on the front page of the state news site. Pine Hollow legacy, deaths, cover-ups, and a hidden room in the woods. By Sunday, Sheriff Marlowe was under investigation. By Monday, he was in handcuffs. They found inconsistencies in reports going back 20 years, missing files, altered records, too many to ignore. As for Mayor Kelton, gone. His office was empty, his house abandoned. He vanished like smoke, which told me he had help, maybe more people in power, maybe something bigger than our little town. But it didn't matter, because the rot had finally been dragged into the light. I stood on the porch of the cabin that night, the cold air brushing against my face, fog curling low around the trees. The door behind me was still charred from the fire they tried to start. The metal lock on the basement had been replaced with something stronger. The files were backed up now. 3 copies in 3 different places. Let them come again, I thought. I wasn't leaving. This place, this story, this fight, it was mine now. And I understood, finally, what Grandpa meant when he said the cabin remembered. It remembered everything. Footsteps in the dark, whispers behind smiles, secrets buried under concrete and silence. But not anymore. I turned and looked into the woods. Still quiet, but no longer suffocating. No longer watching me with hostile breath, just waiting. And then I said it out loud, not for them, for myself. They thought I came for the cabin. I stayed for the truth.